Hello there, I'm Thundaga and welcome to my How to Make a Pokemon Game tutorial series. This series will cover all of the essential info that you need to make a Pokemon game in RPG Maker and Pokemon Essentials. In this episode, we'll be looking at Pokemon abilities. First, we'll cover how abilities are defined in the PBS and set on Pokemon. After that, we'll dig into the scripts to see how a few simple abilities have been set up. After that, we'll make a couple of our own new abilities and show them off in-game. With all that said, let's get into it. Inside of our game's PBS folder, we can find the abilities text near the top here. This is where abilities are defined. I also have some of the Gen 9 abilities from when we installed the Gen 9 plugin, but for now, let's just focus on the base abilities that came with Pokemon Essentials. Looking through the abilities PBS here, we can see that every ability has a unique ID, and then there's their name and description. So for example, Drizzle near the top here says, description, the Pokemon makes it rain if it appears in battle. You'll notice though that none of the functionality is defined here in the PBS though. The functionality is done in the scripts instead, primarily in the battle ability effects. So pretty soon here, we're gonna have to use CTRL-SHIFT-F again to hunt down some ability code. Before we move away from the PBS though, let's also quickly review where abilities are set per Pokemon. Inside of the Pokemon.txt PBS file, for each entry, we can see that a Pokemon has standard abilities, as well as hidden abilities. Most Pokemon have either one or two standard abilities, and then one hidden ability. But there are some exceptions. For example, Metapod just has one ability, and that's Shed Skin, and it has 0 hidden abilities. If we look at a Pokemon like Pidgey though, we can see 2 standard abilities, and then 1 hidden ability. These standard abilities are always Index 0 and then Index 1, and then the hidden ability here is Index 2. If we had another hidden ability, then that would be Index 3. When this Pokemon appears in the wild, it will always have one of its standard abilities chosen, and never one of the hidden abilities chosen. These hidden abilities cannot appear on wild Pokemon, but they can still be obtained in a couple other ways. The first way is with the item Ability Patch, which can set a Pokemon's ability to its hidden ability. There's also above it the Ability Capsule item, which allows you to select a different standard ability, should one exist. Another way would be to use a script command in an event to force set a Pokemon's ability index. I made an example event here to show off a really basic version of what I'm talking about. So when we talk to this guy here, they will give us a choice of what index to set our ability to, and that's either 0, 1, or 2. What this event is doing is it's selecting the first Pokemon in our party, which is $player.party and then index 0 here. So for example, if we select index 2, what it will do is it will get the first Pokemon in our party by doing player.party0, and then do .ability index equals 2. A good example of this in the base Essentials maps is in the Larusian Town Pokemon Fan Club here. This event on the right side of the room will give us a special Bulbasaur. Looking through the event commands here, we can see that it does PB add foreign Pokemon to add a Bulbasaur to our team. What it will then do is underneath do some script commands to get the last Pokemon in our party and then start modifying them. Let's dive in a little bit deeper though. We can see that it's setting Pokemon equal to the last Pokemon in our party. Then it's doing some modifications to the Pokemon. So Pokemon.ability index equals 2, so it's getting the hidden ability. It's setting its nature to modest, it's setting its Pokeball to Cherish Ball, and then it's also setting shiny to true, so it's going to be a shiny Bulbasaur. Then lastly, what it needs to do is calculate that Pokemon's stats. So using events, it's very, very possible to grab Pokemon and then modify them and, change their abilities and many other fields on the Pokemon. I think that's pretty cool stuff. If you ever want to read some more about abilities, I would recommend visiting this page of the Essentials Engine Wiki. Looking through the page, it talks about ability definitions and ability effects, which we'll be covering in just a little bit, but then it also talks about some of the other info like assigning an ability to Pokemon species and the difference between these normal abilities and hidden abilities. Alright, now let's start breaking down some ability functionality in the scripts. I mentioned it earlier, but these primarily live inside of the Battle Ability Effects script. At the top of the script here, we can see that there are a bunch of different types of ability effects that our abilities could fall into. There's ability effects for end of round weather, there's on switch in, on switch out, on flinch, on stat gain, on stat loss, so many more. Like for example here at the top is speed calc. This is for abilities that would modify the user's speed. If we copy it and do Control-F and then paste that in and start going down and finding other examples of speed calc abilities, we can see some of the speed calc handlers here, the top of which is the ability Chlorophyll. Looking through the definition, we can see what this does is it just multiplies our speed by 2 if we're in the sun or in the harsh sun. As we scroll down through this script, we can see that there are a ton of different types of abilities. So what I would recommend that you do is just look through this list yourself and see how many different abilities are set up and how they're set up. A lot of these abilities are super specific in their setup, so if you ever want to make a new ability, then I would definitely recommend that you look at these and use the existing ability effects as a reference starting point. Another good example for an ability is the infamous Intimidate, which is an on-switch-in ability. It's a little convoluted here to follow the exact script, but in general what it does is it triggers the ability splash effect, and then for each enemy it tries to lower their attack stat. There are some additional conditions in here for things like contrary, or if their attack stat is already at a minimum. Funnily enough though, at the bottom here, there is also a check for abilities on Intimidated, because there is an ability that has the on Intimidated type. The ability Rattled will actually raise the user's speed by 1 level if they ever get intimidated. Rattled is an interesting ability because it actually has 2 ability effects. There's on Intimidated, where it raises the user's speed 1 level, but if we look through the scripts, we can see there's an additional ability effect for on being hit. If this Pokemon gets hit by a Bug, Dark, or Ghost type move, then it will also raise the user's speed stat 1 level. A simpler example of a switch-in ability would be the ability Intrepid Sword, which raises the user's attack by 1 stage on switch-in. If you want to make your own new ability, there's a very high chance that you'll be looking through this battle ability effects script and kind of copying and pasting some of the existing stuff that's similar to the ability you want to make. There are also some abilities that do live in another script though. These are some of the form-changing abilities, and they mostly live inside of the Battler Change Self script. In here, there are a lot of different checks to see if specific Pokemon should change form. For example, scrolling down here, we can see there's a function called PB Check Form, and if we keep scrolling down through that, we can see that there's some specific instances for specific Pokemon and their abilities. For example here, if the species is Wishy-Washy and their ability is Schooling, and if their level is greater than or equal to 20, and their health is greater than 1/4 of their health, and if their form is not already equal to 1, then change their form to 1 and print out the "they formed a school" text. Otherwise, if their form is not already 0, then change their form to 0 and say that they stopped schooling. There are a bunch of other examples for form changes as well. Like for example, if we scroll up through here, we can see like PB check form on weather change for cast form and Cherim. And scrolling up even further, we can see PB check form on moveset change, where if Keldeo knows Sacred Sword, it'll transform to Form 1. There are so many different abilities and effects and form-changing things, it's really impossible to cover them all. As a general tip, what I would recommend you do is use CTRL-SHIFT-F and find some things that are very similar to what you'd like to make and learn from them. Like for example, let's say we want to make a new ability and it's kind of similar to Speed Boost, but it raises our attack. Let's use CTRL-SHIFT-F and type in Speed Boost and see where that takes us. Looks like right here, Battle Ability Effects. And it looks like it's an end of round effect. If it's not the very first turn, so if the battler turn count is greater than 0, and we're not running away, and we can raise our speed, then raise our speed 1 level. Let's make a new ability here called Attack Boost, where every turn it raises our physical attack. What we can do is we can just copy this, go in here, paste it, and instead of Speed Boost, let's call this one Attack Boost. Then, if it's past the first turn, and we're not running away, and we can raise our attack, then raise our attack by 1 level. Now let's go into our PBS and actually define Attack Boost as a new ability. I'm looking at the items right now, we need to be looking at the abilities. And let's go in and just add it near the top here. I'm gonna copy Stench and paste it right there, and then modify it and start calling it Attack Boost. And then the name will be Attack Boost. And the description will be raises the user's attack 1 level every turn. And there we go, we're already almost done. Let's go to our Pokemon now, and let's go and give Charizard Attack Boost. Actually, you know what'd be funny? Let's give it to Metapod. Let's give it so Metapod raises its attack 1 level every turn. Now, let's go into our game and run it, and save our changes and compile everything, and then see how it looks in-game. Alright, so here I am with my Metapod, and if we go into our Pokemon and look at it, we can see that its ability right now is Shed Skin. What we could do is we could use Debug to change its ability, but instead let's talk to that NPC I showed off earlier. We know that index 0 is Shed Skin, so if we change the ability index to 1, now our Metapod should have the ability of Attack Boost. There we go, it raises the user's attack 1 level every turn. Nice. If we try to change this to 2, it won't work because Metapod doesn't have any hidden abilities set up. So what this will do is instead just change its ability not to a hidden ability, but back to index 0, so shed skin. Now, instead, let's go and change it back to 1. Then let's get into a wild battle and see attack boost in action. Our Metapod's attack stat is going to be so high, but I don't think it'll be really able to do much. Let's go, Metapod. You can do it. We've been intimidated, but that doesn't matter. We can harden, and our attack is going to raise so much. Oh, this is going to be so dumb. Oh no, we've been poisoned too. That's just great. Okay, Metapod was hurt by the poison. And our attack boost! There we go, it activates. Nice, our attack went up. We're not going to do any damage with it though, because we put it on Metapod. And our defense is going down, but hey, we're hardening, and look, attack boost is going to trigger again. Every single turn, our attack stat is going to get higher and higher. And that's pretty awesome. It's a quick and easy way to make a new ability like this. Let's make a couple more abilities though for good measure and show those off. I was thinking it would be interesting to make an ability that sets up Trick Room on Switch-In. So let's go ahead and make that using Misty Surge here as our reference starting point. On Switch-In for Misty Surge, what that does is it will do PB Start Terrain and set it to Misty Terrain on Switch-In. So we want to do something similar to this, but set up Trick Room instead of the Misty Terrain. First, let's go and copy this entire block here and then paste it and then begin modifying it for our new ability. And instead of Misty Surge, how about we call it Tricky Surge, because we're setting up Trick Room in a surge of trickiness. The note at the bottom here is important, by the way. We're doing the Show ability splash, but we're not ever calling the Hide ability splash. PB Start Terrain will do the hide automatically, but since our end goal is to ultimately not be using terrain and to do something else, we should be sure to call Battle PB Hide ability splash here at the bottom of Tricky Surge. So now we'll show it, do some stuff, and then hide it. Now the next thing we need to do is actually figure out how Trick Room works in the code. So let's do CTRL-SHIFT-F and type in Trick Room and see what we can find. We want this code here in the move effects. What this does is it sets up a battlefield effect for Trick Room and sets the number of Trick Room turns. If you use it while Trick Room is already active, it'll set those Trick Room turns to 0 and say it reverted the dimensions. Otherwise, it'll set the Trick Room turns to 5 and twist the dimensions. What we want is this chunk of code right here that's setting the Trick Room turns to 5 and twisting the dimensions. Let's go ahead and copy this, and then we want to go back to our ability, paste it in, and start modifying it. In our ability here, where it's doing the start terrain, we want to get rid of that and instead do all the stuff here for the Trick Room turns. We need to modify how these variables are being called though, because instead of calling @battle, we're calling battle. And instead of user, we're going to be calling battler. So instead of @battle field effects Trick Room equals 5, we'll just do battle here. Same down here. And then instead of user PB this, we're going to do battler PB this. We still need to make a change here. Right now this won't work if we're in Misty Terrain. Let's make it so instead it won't work if Trick Room is already up. The way that we can do that is by checking if these Trick Room turns are greater than 0. So instead of checking if it's Misty, what we can do is just say, if the Trick Room turns are greater than 0, then don't do it. Otherwise, set those turns to 5 and twist the dimensions. Now we're basically done. This will work and set up Trick Room, but we can make it look even cooler by playing the Trick Room animation. Looking through the abilities, we can see that Imposter actually calls PB animation for transform, and then the user is battler, and then the target is choice. Up above, we can see that choice is being set to battler.pb direct opposing. So with these, what we could do is call a PB animation for Trick Room, battler, and then battler.pb direct opposing. So let's go ahead and put that in our Trick Room ability. Let's copy this line here and then go back to where Tricky Surge is. I'm having to scroll up and down through this script a lot, but it's gonna be worth it because this is gonna look really cool. Let's have the animation play right here. So it'll play the animation before it plays the text that the dimensions were twisted. Then instead of playing the transform animation, let's have it play the Trick Room animation. Let's go back to Imposter and grab this chunk of code right here. What we wanna do is grab the PB direct opposing Pokemon. So that'll be the target for this animation. Let's copy that and then once again go back to our Tricky Surge. And then what we can do is paste that in here instead of choice. So now it'll play the Trick Room animation where the user is the battler and the opposite of Pokemon for the battler is the target. Now we're basically done setting up the ability effect, but we also have to define it in PBS and set it on a Pokemon again. If we go back to our abilities PBS, what we can do is copy what we made for attack boost, go down here, and let's make it so it matches. It has to be Tricky Surge. The IDs have to match here. Let's also name it Tricky Surge. And for description, we'll say, sets up Trick Room when entering the battle. Now we just need to put it on another Pokemon. Let's put it on Metapod again. Instead of Attack Boost, we can give it Tricky Surge. Now all we have to do is save this, and then save our changes, and run our game, and compile everything, and we'll see it in game. We can see our Metapod has Tricky Surge, so now let's go into a wild battle and see it. Oh, that wild battle triggered instantly. Let's go. Level 3 Rattata, cool. Go Metapod, Tricky Surge. Ooh, look at that, the Trick Room animation played. It says twisted the dimensions, and then it hid the ability Splash. That's really cool. Are we faster? No, in Trick Room, they're faster now. Cool. One cool thing you can do to confirm that Trick Room is up is at any time, while you're playing the game in debug mode, if you hit the F9 key, you can bring up the Battle Debug menu. From the Battle Debug menu, we can see a lot of things and edit a lot of things that's currently in our battle, such as the field effects. If we go down here to other field effects, we can see the Trick Room duration. We can see a lot of other cool stuff in here as well. At any time, we can select this and modify it too, so we could make it so that way we have 38 turns of Trick Room. This is super useful for testing. I don't use it too much, or as much as I would like to, but it's really nice to know it exists. And once again, you can activate this by pressing the F9 key while you're in a battle in debug mode. Let's try making one more ability. How about this time we make an ability where a Pokemon's form changes? Let's make an ability where if the weather is Sandstorm, our Pokemon will change to Form 1. We can do this super easily by using Cherim's Flower Gift ability as a starting point for reference. We covered it briefly earlier, but this exists inside of the Battler Change Self script. Here we can see that inside of the function PB check form on weather change, if we scroll down a little bit, there is a section here for Cherim and Flower Gift. If the Pokemon is species Cherim, and if they have the ability Flower Gift, it will then do the rest of the checks. By default, our form will be 0 here, but it'll set it to 1 if it's sunny or the weather is harsh sun. Then if our Pokemon's form is different than the new form we're trying to set, it will play the animation, play the ability Splash, and change our Pokemon's form. Otherwise, we'll just be Form 0 and nothing will change. This function here, PB change form, by the way, will only change the Pokemon's form if the number inside here is different than what the Pokemon's form currently is. So if we enter the battle and we're Form 0, and then we do this PB change Form 0, nothing will happen, nothing will change. Let's go in now and copy and paste this and change it to be our new ability. I'm gonna grab this whole chunk right here, go down, copy it, and paste it. And now we need to think of what Pokemon we want to change and what the ability should be called. I know a Pokemon that has a lot of forms is Deoxys. So for testing, let's just put this ability on Deoxys. And we'll call it, how about we say Sand Shift? I think that's cool. It's shifting forms in the sand. So now if the Pokemon is species Deoxys, and if it has the ability Sand Shift, well, then it'll start in Form 0, but otherwise it'll change to Form 1 if the weather is Sandstorm. So let's just go in and change this as well. I know that the weather ID is just Sandstorm, like this. From a functionality standpoint, we're basically done here. If the weather is Sandstorm, we'll change to Form 1, otherwise we'll stay in Form 0. Now we just need to add this to the PBS and add it to our Pokemon. In the abilities here, let's go and copy and paste once again, and we will call our last new ability Sand Shift. I think that's kind of a cool name for our ability. And let's make it so that way the description says, changes form in the Sandstorm. Now let's save that, and then for our Pokemon, we need to go in and find Deoxys. So we made it so that way this ability only applies to the Pokemon Deoxys, which by default its ability is just Pressure. That ability is a little boring though. Let's make it so that way it changes forms in the sand. Let's replace Pressure with Sand Shift here. Now let's compile everything, run our game, and test it out. I've gone ahead and debug granted myself a Deoxys, and I've also changed the map's metadata to be Sandstorm. Real quick, let's also go look at our Deoxys, and let's check with the abilities. It's Sand Shift. It'll change the form in the Sandstorm. Let's go and test it out in a battle now. Let's see what we can fight. I'm interested to see our Deoxys change form once we get into the Sandstorm. All right, a Sandstorm is raging. Whoa, Sand Shift is activated, and Deoxys transformed. Look at that. Now we are a Form 1 Deoxys. That's cool. We're already in the battle, so I don't need to switch. Take a look at that. Our form has changed. Now let's get the heck out of here. All right, that was a fun battle. Wouldn't you know, our Deoxys is still in Form 1 because we never set it back to Form 0. That's kind of cool. Now let's test another battle when we're not in a Sandstorm. I'm gonna go to another map now, and then via debug, do battle, test wild battle against the wild Bulbasaur. Now what this should do is now reset our form back to Form 0, because Sand Shift will detect that we're not in a Sandstorm. And look at that, now we're back to Form 0. Now we can run away, And our Deoxys will revert back to its base form, Form 0. That's pretty cool. It's fun messing around with abilities like this that change Pokemon forms. If we wanted our Pokemon to reset back to Form 0 at the end of the battle, that would be done in the Form Handler script. We can see here that Cherim has get form on leaving battle, and on leaving battle it sets it to Form 0 again. So if we wanted this for our Deoxys to also reset back to Form 0, we could just do this same exact thing, but for Deoxys. This way, if we end a battle in Form 1, then it will revert back to Form 0 at the end. I'll cover more of this in the Pokemon Forms tutorial, but as you can see, if you do a little bit of scrolling around here, there's other things like get form on creation. Pokemon Forms are pretty cool, but yeah, I don't want to spoil too much. We're going to get into that in a future tutorial. As a final note before we wrap up here, I want to mention how important it is to look through these scripts and see how these abilities work, and get comfortable using CTRL-SHIFT-F to search through all the scripts and find where things are defined. There are so many different types of abilities, and apologies if I didn't cover the exact type of ability you'd like to make for your game, but hopefully this will start you in the right direction for researching similar abilities. For example, I didn't cover abilities that increase damage based on move types, such as the ability Strong Jaw, but hopefully after this tutorial, you feel comfortable using CTRL-SHIFT-F and then typing in Strong Jaw, and then looking through and seeing how the ability effect is defined. Additionally, I hope you feel a little bit more comfortable following the chain of code from there. Like for example, we see here it boosts the power by 1.5 if the move is a biting move, but if we did CTRL-SHIFT-F, then we could figure out how exactly is the definition for a biting move. If the move has the flag biting, then it's a biting move, and if it has the flag punching, it's a punching move, so on and so forth. Always remember that at the end of the day, most of these scripting challenges will end up being looking through what's already defined and then copying and modifying from there. And that does it for this tutorial on abilities. I hope you feel more comfortable modifying existing abilities or making some new abilities of your own. Thank you so much for watching. If you learned something from this tutorial, please remember to like and subscribe. To access my tutorial website, please check the link in the video description. As a reminder, this tutorial video is for Pokemon Essentials version 21.1, so in the future, it's possible that the layout of some things could be changed. In general though, this series should get you where you need to go when it comes to making your own Pokemon fan game. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned something, and I hope you have a good one. Best of luck to you in your Pokemon fan game endeavors. Bye now!